I never wanted to become the galaxy's most controversial xenobiologist. For 15 years, I studied humans in relative obscurity, publishing papers that gathered digital dust in a unified council's archives. My name, Talan Vor, was known only to a handful of academic peers who shared my fascination with the isolated blue planet in the Sol system. Today, as I stand beside humanity's ambassador in the new council chambers, I can't help but recall the day everything changed. The day 87 species unanimously voted to enslave Earth. The council chamber had never felt so suffocating. The vast, cathedral-like space normally inspired awe with its soaring crystalline architecture and hovering delegate platforms arranged in perfect concentric circles. That day, however, as I clutched my data tablet with trembling hands, it felt like a tribunal. The classification hearing for Species 12, E3, designation human, will now commence, announced High Chairperson Gunn, his voice reverberating through the chamber. The Corvaxi leader's multiple eye stalks swiveled with practiced precision, surveying the gathered representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species. Dr. Talan Vor of the Athri Institute has been summoned to present the final assessment. I clear my throat, acutely aware that I was about to commit career suicide, through secure channels to a small coalition of neutral species. I didn't know if it would make any difference, but I couldn't stand by and watch another civilization fall victim to the Council's insatiable appetite for expansion. 3 days later, the Council sent Earth its ultimatum. The message was translated into 37 human languages and broadcast globally. Surrender or face overwhelming force. The ultimatum included, as per standard protocol, evidence of the Council's technological superiority, recordings of ships capable of reducing cities to ash in seconds, weapons that could boil oceans, shields impervious to anything humans could deploy. The response came 48 hours later, in a simple text transmission in what humans called English. We do not surrender. The Council's Strategic Command convened immediately, treating the situation as a minor inconvenience. The standard suppression playbook was enacted. Communication networks would be disabled first, followed by precision strikes against military installations, and finally the deployment of pacification forces. The entire operation was expected to last no more than 1 standard week. I watched from exile on Kepler Station as everything went catastrophically wrong. First, the communication disruption failed. Somehow, humans had detected and countered the quantum interference technology that had disabled the networks of dozens of subjugated worlds before them. Not only that, but they had managed to trace the attack back to its source, compromising one of the Council's forward operating vessels. Impossible, declared Admiral Zrith of the subjugation fleet. Their technology is primitive. They shouldn't even be able to detect our presence, let alone counter our measures. But counter them they did. And that was just the beginning. Within days, human nations that had been in conflict for generations began cooperating with unprecedented unity. Military resources were pooled. Scientific institutions shared discoveries freely. A unified Earth Defense Force was established with astonishing speed. Most shocking of all, they began reaching out to other species, particularly those who, like themselves, had been deemed exploitable by the Council. Using the compromised Council vessel as both a communications hub and a source of advanced technology, humans began forming alliances. I received a secure transmission from Envoy Rilsan of the Bethari, a species that had managed to maintain neutrality despite enormous pressure. Your assessment was correct, Dr. Vor. These humans, they're not behaving like any Category 8 species we've ever encountered. They're not cowering or pleading. They're organizing. The Council responded with escalation, of course. 15 capital ships were deployed to the Sol system, carrying enough firepower to reduce Earth to molten slag. High Chairperson Gunn broadcast the deployment across all galactic channels as a warning to any who might consider supporting the human resistance. Let this serve as a reminder, he declared, his voice steady but strained. The Council's authority is absolute. No single world can stand against our collective might. I watched with billions of others as the Armada approached Earth, as weapon systems came online, as the moment of humanity's subjugation drew near. What happened next would change the course of galactic history forever. The Council fleet, upon reaching optimal firing position, suddenly went dark. Not just their communications, but everything: weapons, shields, propulsion. 15 of the most powerful vessels ever constructed drifted helplessly in space, their crews alive but powerless. Earth's response came in the form of a global broadcast, transmitted simultaneously to the Council headquarters and to every world within communication range. A human woman in a military uniform addressed the galaxy. "I am Admiral Kayla Drace of Earth United Command. Your fleet has been neutralized by what we call the Black Beam, a technology that selectively disrupts electrical systems without harming organic life. Your crews are unharmed. They have air and basic life support, but nothing else." She paused, her expression not triumphant but resolute. "We could have destroyed your vessels completely. We chose not to. Unlike the Council, we do not believe that technological superiority grants the right to dominate. We do not believe that any species has the authority to classify another as expendable." A series of images appeared beside her: Council subjugation records, classification documents, resource extraction plans for Earth. My own research was there too, the warnings I had issued. "We have 3 demands," Admiral Drace continued. "First, the immediate dissolution of the species classification system. Second, full autonomy for all worlds currently under Council subjugation. Third, recognition of Earth as a sovereign equal in all galactic matters. You have 7 days to comply." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in its long history, the unified Council faced not just resistance, but defeat. The response was panic. Species began withdrawing from the Council en masse. Some sought to establish independent alliances. Others sent desperate messages to Earth, pleading for protection against Council retaliation. The carefully maintained hierarchy that had structured galactic politics for millennia began to crumble. High Chairperson Gunn demanded I be brought before an emergency session of the Council's inner circle. When I arrived, I found not the imperious leader I remembered, but a desperate politician struggling to maintain control. "You knew," he accused, my stalks quivering with rage. "You knew what they were capable of." "I tried to tell you," I replied simply. "I said they were dangerous when threatened. I warned you about their adaptability, their ingenuity." "How?" he demanded. "How did primitives who still used combustion engines develop technology that could neutralize our most advanced systems?" I couldn't help but laugh. "That's precisely what makes them unique, Chairperson. When faced with a superior force, they don't surrender, they innovate. They collaborate. They transform. You gave them an existential threat, and they responded by making a quantum leap. What do we do?" The question came from Delegate Muir, her usual confidence shattered. "If we refuse their demands, they could use this weapon against any world in the Council." "They won't," I said with certainty. "How can you be sure?" Gunn demanded. "Because I've studied them for 15 years. If they wanted to conquer, they would have destroyed your fleet, not disabled it. The fact that they spared those crews tells you everything you need to know about how they intend to use their power." In the weeks that followed, I was summoned repeatedly to interpret human communications, to explain their intentions, to help craft responses that wouldn't provoke them further. The Council, once so dismissive of my expertise, now hung on my every word. The 7-day deadline came. The Council, fractured and fearful, accepted all 3 demands. I was not surprised when, a month later, I received a direct communication from Earth. Admiral Drace herself invited me to join a new initiative, the Galactic Cooperative Alliance, a voluntary association of species dedicated to mutual aid and advancement rather than exploitation. "Your warning gave us time to prepare, Dr. Vore," she told me during our first meeting. "Without it, we might have been caught unaware." "I'm just glad someone listened," I replied, "even if it wasn't my own people." She smiled. "Someday, You'll have to tell me how a member of a Category 2 species became so concerned with the welfare of a Category 8. Perhaps because I never believed those categories meant anything real, I said. Intelligence, creativity, dignity. These qualities can't be quantified by technological achievement alone. Admiral Drace nodded thoughtfully. You know, the Black Beam wasn't entirely our creation. We had help from defectors within the Council, from neutral species who fear they might be next, even from artificial intelligences who saw the classification system as a threat to their own autonomy. So the technology that saved Earth was itself a collaborative effort, I observed. Precisely. And that's the model we hope to expand. Not domination, not exploitation, but cooperation. Mutual advancement. A year later, I stood beside Kayla, now Ambassador Drace, in the newly formed Cooperative Council chambers. Where the old council had arranged species by classification, this new forum seated all representatives in a single circle. Each species, regardless of technological advancement or population, held equal standing. I watched as humans shared their technologies freely, not just the defensive systems that had saved them, but medical advances, sustainable energy solutions, terraforming techniques. They offered aid to worlds ravaged by council exploitation. They established educational exchanges, cultural programs, scientific collaborations. Most remarkably, they extended these benefits even to species that had voted for their subjugation. There was no revenge, no retribution, only a steady, determined effort to build something better than what had come before. You don't seem surprised, Ambassador Drace commented one day, as we watched representatives from 15 formerly hostile species sign a mutual defense pact with Earth. I'm not, I admitted. This is consistent with everything I observed about your species. And yet you were the only one who saw it. I shrugged, perhaps because I was the only one looking at the right metrics. The Council measured advancement in weapons yield and energy output. I measured it in adaptability, in social cohesion under pressure, in capacity for moral reasoning. She laughed. Well, I'm glad you did. Without your warning, we might never have developed the Black Beam in time. The technology that had saved Earth had become something of a legend, a weapon that wasn't really a weapon at all, but rather the ultimate defensive tool. It rendered aggression futile without causing harm. In many ways, it embodied humanity's approach to their unexpected position of galactic leadership. Firm but compassionate, powerful but restrained. Do you think it will last? I asked her, gesturing to the diverse gathering of species engaged in productive dialogue. This new arrangement? Nothing lasts forever, she replied thoughtfully. But I think we've created something sustainable. The old system was built on fear and exploitation. This is built on mutual benefit. It's harder to dismantle something that serves everyone's interests. I nodded, thinking of the countless civilizations that would now develop on their own terms, free from the threat of subjugation. Of the technological and cultural exchanges already yielding remarkable advances. Of the former council species now learning to relate to others as equals rather than resources. You know, I said, when I issued my warning about humanity, I never imagined this outcome. I was simply trying to prevent another tragedy. And instead, you helped catalyze a revolution, she said with a smile. Sometimes the greatest changes come from the simplest acts of conscience. As we watched the proceedings continue, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony. The Council had sought to classify humanity as laborers, beings of limited use beyond their capacity for physical work. Now, those same Council species were queuing up to learn from humans, to adopt their technologies, to embrace their vision of galactic cooperation. They had voted to enslave Earth. Now they pleaded for its guidance. In the end, the greatest weapon in humanity's arsenal wasn't the Black Beam or any other technology. It was their fundamental belief that every sentient being deserved dignity and self-determination. That power came with responsibility. That advancement without compassion wasn't advancement at all. As a xenobiologist, I had documented humanity's unique characteristics, their adaptability, their creativity, their capacity for both competition and profound cooperation. But I had missed perhaps their most remarkable trait, their ability to triumph without becoming that which they had defeated. The old unified council had ruled through force and fear for millennia. Humanity, when handed that same power, chose a different path. Not dominance, but partnership. Not subjugation, but elevation. When I first began studying humans, my colleagues dismissed them as primitive, volatile, unsuited for anything beyond basic labor. They saw the conflicts that plagued Earth's history and concluded that humans were inherently destructive, incapable of the harmony that supposedly characterized advanced civilizations. What they failed to understand, what I tried and failed to make them see, was that humanity's apparent chaos was the source of their greatest strength. Their diversity of thought, their constant challenging of orthodoxy, their willingness to consider radical alternatives. These were not weaknesses, but adaptations that fostered innovation at an unmatched pace. And now, the galaxy was beginning to understand what I had glimpsed during my years of research, that technological advancement and moral evolution were not always correlated, that a species could possess the capacity to destroy worlds yet choose restraint, that true civilization might be measured not by the weapons it created, but by the wars it chose not to fight. Isaac, the integrated artificial intelligence that humans had developed in collaboration with several neutral species, appeared on a hovering platform at the center of the chamber. Its voice, calibrated to be comprehensible to all present regardless of auditory capacity, addressed the gathered representatives. The initial phase of the technological exchange program has been completed, it announced. 37 formerly subjugated worlds now have access to sustainable energy production capabilities. Medical technology distribution has reached 62% of targeted populations. Educational resources have been translated into 412 distinct languages. Ambassador Drace stepped forward. Thank you, Isaac. And what are the former council worlds that have requested assistance? All requests are being processed according to need, rather than former status, Isaac replied. As per directive, no distinction is being made between former classification categories. I watched the representatives of those former council worlds, the very ones who had voted unanimously to enslave Earth, react with visible relief. They had expected punishment, retribution, perhaps even a reversal of the very system they had enforced. Instead, they were being treated as equals, their needs addressed, alongside those they had once deemed inferior. Later, as Ambassador Drace and I walked through the arboretum that connected the council chambers to the residential complex, she confided in me. You know, there were voices on Earth that called for revenge. People who wanted to use our advantage to punish those who had planned to subjugate us. It took considerable debate to establish our current approach. What changed their minds? I asked. History, she replied simply. Our own history is filled with examples of what happens when victors use their power to oppress. Those cycles inevitably lead to more conflict, more suffering. We had a unique opportunity to break that pattern on a galactic scale. She paused, looking up at the carefully cultivated trees from dozens of worlds growing together under the artificial sky. Besides, she continued, pragmatism aligned with idealism in this case. Treating former enemies as partners creates stability. Sharing technology creates mutual dependency. Fostering development creates trade opportunities. Peace is profitable in ways that dominance never can be. I nodded, appreciating the elegant simplicity of the approach. The council spent millennia convinced that hierarchy was the only way to maintain order, that some species were naturally suited to rule and others to serve. A convenient belief for those at the top, she observed dryly. Indeed, but what strikes me most is how quickly that belief collapsed when challenged. How many species instantly recognized a better alternative once it was presented. Ambassador Drace smiled. People, regardless of species, generally prefer cooperation to subjugation when given the choice. The council never gave them that choice. As we returned to the chambers for the afternoon session, I found myself reflecting on my own journey. From an academic studying a supposedly primitive species to an architect of a new galactic order. From a voice ignored to one now sought after for insight. Envoy Ril San of the Bathari approached us, his crystalline form catching the light. The neutral stance of his species had been crucial during the transition, providing a diplomatic bridge between Earth and the fractured Council. Ambassador Drace, Dr. Vor, he greeted us formally. The Consortium of Independent Systems has ratified the Mutual Aid Agreement. 23 worlds formerly under Council resource extraction protocols will now receive technological assistance. Excellent news, Drace responded. Please convey our thanks to the Consortium representatives. After Ril San departed, I turned to Drace. You've achieved more in 1 year than the Council managed in centuries of forced unification. She corrected gently. This is a collaborative achievement, including your contribution, Dr. Vor. Never forget that your warning gave us the precious time we needed. I accepted her acknowledgement with a nod, though in truth, my contribution felt minor compared to the monumental shifts I had witnessed. I had simply done what any scientist ought to do, observed carefully and reported honestly. That such a small act could help catalyze galactic transformation was both humbling and inspiring. The afternoon session focused on the most ambitious project yet, the establishment of the interspecies scientific cooperative. Unlike the Council's tightly controlled research divisions, this new entity would pool knowledge freely, focusing on challenges that affected multiple worlds: disease, environmental degradation, resource scarcity. As I listened to representatives debate the structure and funding of this new initiative, I was struck by the fundamental shift in thinking. Under the Council, research had been directed toward maintaining power imbalances, developing better weapons, more effective resource extraction methods, more sophisticated surveillance. Now, the collective intellectual might of dozens of species was being directed toward shared prosperity. Ambassador Drace addressed the gathering as the session concluded. This cooperative represents the future we are building together, not one where advancement comes at the expense of others, but where each discovery lifts all sentient beings. Not a zero-sum game, but an ever-expanding horizon of possibility. The chamber, once dominated by hierarchy and suspicion, erupted in unanimous approval. That evening, as we watched the twin moons of the neutral world that now hosted the Cooperative Council rise above the horizon, Ambassador Drace shared a piece of human wisdom. There's an old saying on Earth: the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. For a long time, many of us doubted that. Our history seemed to suggest otherwise. But perhaps the arc just needed a more deliberate push. I considered this. The Council's system persisted for thousands of years. Many believed it was the natural order. Nothing about oppression is natural, she replied. Firmly, it requires constant enforcement, constant justification. Once those are removed, something better can emerge surprisingly quickly. She was right, of course. The speed with which the old order had collapsed, once challenged, suggested its foundations had been weaker than anyone realized. Perhaps many species had harbored the same doubts I had, but lacked the courage or opportunity to voice them. As our conversation concluded and we prepared to return to our respective quarters, Ambassador Drace presented me with a small device, a data storage unit decorated with intricate Earth designs. "What's this?" I asked, turning it in my hands. "A copy of your original report on humanity, the one where you warned the Council against classifying us as Category 8. We found it in the archives of the ship we captured." She smiled. "I thought you might like to have it. A reminder that being right matters, even when no one is listening." I accepted the gift with profound gratitude. That report, dismissed, ignored, almost forgotten, had contained the truth that might have saved the Council from itself had they heeded it. Now it was an artifact of a transformed galaxy. 1 year after Earth had faced subjugation, I stood in a chamber where former oppressors and would-be victims worked side by side to build something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly cooperative civilization. Species that had once been categorized, ranked, and exploited now sat as equals, contributing their unique perspectives and abilities to shared challenges. The black beam that had disabled the Council fleet without causing harm had become a symbol of this new approach. Power exercised with restraint, advancement guided by compassion, strength tempered by wisdom. As I watched Ambassador Drace engage with representatives from across the galaxy, some from worlds that had been exploiting others for millennia, some from planets that until recently had been exploited, I was struck by an irony so profound it bordered on cosmic justice. The Council had sought to harness humanity's labor potential while dismissing their other qualities. Now, it was precisely those dismissed qualities, creativity, adaptability, moral reasoning, cooperation under pressure, that were reshaping the galaxy. They had voted to enslave Earth. Now they learned from it.